Jasper Washington stood in first class, expensive Italian suit dripping with red wine as Heather apologized profusely. The blonde woman smirked from his assigned seat, designer blanket spread possessively across both chairs. As passengers recorded, Jasper calmly made one phone call. Suddenly, the engines powered down. All flights grounded indefinitely. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice served, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed someone getting exactly what they deserved, and subscribe to catch more stories of karma coming full circle. Now let's rewind and see how this powerful moment came to be. The morning had started like any other for Jasper Washington. The 43-year-old CEO of Washington Enterprises awoke at precisely 5 a.m., completed his morning workout, and reviewed the quarterly projections before most people had even hit the snooze button. Today wasn't just any day, though. The Bailey Aerospace merger meeting in Chicago could revolutionize air travel as the world knew it. Mr. Washington, I've finalized your presentation materials for the Bailey meeting, said Derek Monroe, his executive assistant of 5 years, handing him a sleek portfolio as Jasper adjusted his custom-tailored navy suit. The Bailey family is excited about the potential partnership. This could create thousands of jobs in communities that desperately need them. Jasper nodded, taking the portfolio with a grateful smile. Thank you, Derek. This meeting has been 2 years in the making. What made Jasper Washington extraordinary wasn't just his business acumen that had transformed a small tech startup into a Fortune 500 company with lucrative government contracts. It was how he'd gotten there. Raised by a single mother in South Memphis, Jasper had graduated top of his class at Howard University before earning his MBA at Harvard. His journey from the struggling neighborhoods of Memphis to the boardrooms of power had been anything but easy. Your private jet is ready whenever you are, sir, Derek mentioned, checking his tablet. Jasper shook his head. I'll fly commercial today. The environmental impact report we're presenting to Bailey includes our commitment to reducing carbon footprints. I should practice what we preach. This decision reflected Jasper's leadership philosophy. Despite his tremendous success, he remained grounded, remembering the lessons his late grandfather had instilled in him. James Washington had lived through the civil rights movement, facing discrimination far worse than anything Jasper encountered in corporate America. Success doesn't exempt you from prejudice, his grandfather often said, but it gives you the platform to change the systems that perpetuate it. As Jasper packed his briefcase, he glanced at the framed photo on his desk, his grandfather standing proudly outside the factory where he'd worked for 30 years without a single promotion, despite training countless white men who became his supervisors. That quiet dignity in the face of injustice had shaped Jasper's approach to the countless microaggressions and outright discrimination he'd faced throughout his career. Your earlier flight was cancelled due to mechanical issues, Derek informed him, interrupting his thoughts. I've booked you on the 10:30 a.m. flight instead. First class, window seat. You'll still make the meeting with time to spare. Perfect, Jasper replied, checking his watch. The Bailey meeting wasn't just another business deal. It represented the culmination of his vision to create technology that could make air travel more accessible while creating jobs in underserved communities. The proprietary navigation system his company had developed could reduce airline operational costs by nearly 30%, savings that could be passed on to consumers while improving safety. As his town car pulled away from his office building, Jasper reviewed the presentation on his tablet, unaware that his commitment to flying commercial today would test his grandfather's lessons about dignity in ways he couldn't imagine. Memphis International Airport buzzed with the usual morning activity as Jasper strode through the sliding doors, overnight bag in one hand, phone in the other. He moved with purpose, the kind of confident efficiency that came from hundreds of business trips. Yes, the projections look solid, he spoke into his phone, navigating around a family struggling with oversized luggage. Tell the team we'll finalize after the Bailey meeting tomorrow. He ended the call just as he approached the priority security line. A TSA agent, Michael according to his name tag, looked up from Jasper's boarding pass and ID with a skeptical expression. First class to Chicago?" he asked, emphasizing first class with a hint of disbelief while studying Jasper's face, then his ID, then back to his face again. "That's correct," Jasper replied evenly, recognizing the familiar pattern of doubt. Michael frowned. "This is the priority security line. Regular security is down that way." He gestured vaguely toward the longer line where dozens of travelers waited. "I'm aware. I have a first-class ticket, which qualifies for this line," Jasper explained calmly, having experienced this particular dance many times before. "I'm going to need to verify this," Michael said, holding the boarding pass and ID longer than necessary. He motioned to a colleague, who was processing white travelers through without similar scrutiny. Before the situation could escalate, a supervisor approached. "Is there a problem here?" asked Allison Peterson, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized Jasper. "Mr. Washington. I apologize for any inconvenience. Please, go right ahead." She shot Michael a pointed look. "I just read about your company in Fortune magazine. Congratulations on the expansion." "Thank you," Jasper replied with a polite nod, accepting his documents back from a now flustered Michael. This was his reality. Constantly toggling between being invisible and being a threat until someone recognized his name or status. His grandfather would have said he was lucky. In his day, no amount of accomplishment would have overridden the color of his skin. In the first-class lounge, Jasper settled into a quiet corner to review his presentation. 3 seats away, a blonde woman in her 40s with expensively highlighted hair spoke loudly into her phone, designer sunglasses perched on her head despite being indoors. "Well, that's just ridiculous, Stephanie," she complained, her voice carrying throughout the lounge. "They need to understand there's a certain standard. I mean, they let just anyone in these lounges now." She glanced pointedly at Jasper. "The exclusivity factor is completely gone. I've told Bradley he needs to speak with the membership director." Jasper didn't react, continuing to review his notes while sipping his coffee. He'd developed a sixth sense for people like her, the type who viewed diversity as a personal inconvenience rather than a societal strength. The woman, who would later be identified as Kimberly Porter, continued her performative displeasure, shifting topics seamlessly from the lounge's declining standards to her recent vacation home purchase to her dissatisfaction with service staff who don't know their place anymore. Boarding began 30 minutes later. As Jasper gathered his belongings, a young black pilot approached him. "Excuse me, Mr. Washington. I'm Darnell Reynolds. I just wanted to say you're a huge inspiration to me. Your speech at the National Black Engineers Conference last year changed my career trajectory." Jasper smiled genuinely, shaking the young man's hand. "That means a lot, Darnell. Are you flying today?" "Co-piloting to Chicago, sir. First time on this route." His pride was evident. "Well, I'll be on your flight." "Looking forward to a smooth ride," Jasper said warmly. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the boarding gate. Kimberly from the lounge had pushed past an elderly couple to position herself at the front of the line, despite the announcement clearly stating that boarding would begin with those needing special assistance. "I'm first class," she announced loudly to the gate agent. "I should board first. I paid good money for this ticket." The gate agent, maintaining professional composure, explained that after passengers needing assistance, first-class boarding would begin immediately. Kimberly huffed dramatically but stepped aside with visible reluctance. When Jasper's boarding group was called, he made his way onto the plane, nodding to Darnell who stood with the captain greeting passengers. The flight attendant at the cabin entrance, Heather Thompson, checked his boarding pass and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Washington. 2A is on the right side, second row. Can I get you a pre-flight beverage once you're settled?" "Water would be fine, thank you," he replied. As he moved toward his assigned seat, he noticed Kimberly already seated in the first-class cabin, giving him a look of undisguised hostility when she spotted him. Her designer handbag occupied the adjacent seat, and she made no move to retrieve it as he approached. Jasper's phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Bailey family already arrived in Chicago. Looking forward to meeting you. Don't forget Howard Bailey is bringing his daughter Hannah, who's taking over as CEO next month. The stakes for today's meeting had just gotten higher. Making a good impression on the incoming CEO would be crucial for the partnership. Jasper put his phone away, unaware that his carefully planned day was about to unravel in ways he couldn't imagine. Jasper approached row 2, where his assigned seat 2A awaited. However, instead of finding an empty window seat, he discovered Kimberly Porter comfortably ensconced in what should have been his spot. Her designer cashmere blanket was strategically spread across both seats, 2A and 2B, while her purse and shopping bags occupied any remaining space. "Excuse me," Jasper said politely, displaying his boarding pass. "I believe you're in my seat. I'm assigned to 2A. Kimberly glanced up from her phone, made brief eye contact, then returned to scrolling through her social media feed, pretending not to hear him despite the quietness of the cabin. Jasper tried again, his voice still pleasant but slightly firmer. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mix-up. My ticket is for seat 2A. This time, Kimberly looked up with a practiced expression of annoyance. "These seats are taken," she stated flatly, despite clearly traveling alone. Other first-class passengers were beginning to take notice of the interaction, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats while others watched with undisguised interest. A businessman across the aisle had already discreetly begun recording with his phone. Heather, the flight attendant who had greeted Jasper, approached after noticing the situation. "Is everything all right here?" she asked. "This gentleman seems confused about seating," Kimberly said before Jasper could respond. "I've explained these seats are occupied." "Actually," Jasper interjected calmly, handing his boarding pass to Heather, "I'm assigned to seat A2A for this flight." Heather quickly verified the information. "Yes, Mr. Washington is indeed assigned to 2A, she confirmed, turning to Kimberly. "Ma'am, could you please verify your seat assignment?" With a dramatic sigh, Kimberly produced her own boarding pass, which clearly showed she was assigned to 2B. The aisle seat, not the window seat she currently occupied. "As you can see, I need both seats," Kimberly insisted, making no move to relocate. "I'm a nervous flyer and need the extra space. I paid good money for first class." "Ma'am, so did Mr. Washington," Heather explained patiently. "If you'd like additional space, we would have needed to arrange that in advance with an extra seat purchase. I'll need to ask you to move to your assigned seat so Mr. Washington can have his." Kimberly's face flushed with indignation. "Do you know who I am? My husband's brother sits on the board of this airline. This is ridiculous." By now, the cabin had grown quiet as passengers watched the scene unfold. Jasper maintained his composure, standing in the aisle as the confrontation continued. "I understand your concern," Heather said professionally, "but I need to ensure all passengers are in their assigned seats before takeoff." Reluctantly, Kimberly began gathering her belongings, muttering under her breath about standards going downhill and certain people not knowing their place. As Jasper moved to take his rightful seat, Kimberly made a sudden movement, and her nearly full glass of red wine accidentally tipped over, splashing across Jasper's custom Italian suit and white shirt. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed with exaggerated shock that didn't reach her eyes. "What a terrible accident." Jasper froze momentarily as the cold liquid soaked through his clothing. The $5,000 suit he'd chosen specifically for the Bailey meeting was now stained with deep red splotches. Several passengers gasped audibly. "Sir, I am so sorry," Heather apologized profusely, immediately grabbing cocktail napkins to help. "Let me get you some club soda for that." Kimberly's demeanor shifted instantly from false apology to offensive defense. "He was hovering over me," she declared loudly. "I felt threatened. Anyone would have been startled." She pulled out her phone and began dialing. "I'm calling security." This man is being aggressive and making me feel unsafe. The racial coding in her language wasn't subtle. Without explicitly mentioning race, Kimberly had deployed terms like threatening and aggressive that were frequently used to characterize black men regardless of their actual behavior. Jasper had remained perfectly calm and professional throughout the entire interaction. Brian Carson, a middle-aged passenger seated across the aisle, spoke up. "That's completely untrue. This gentleman has been nothing but polite while you've been rude and obstructive. I've recorded the whole interaction." He held up his phone as evidence. Kimberly's eyes narrowed. "Mind your own business," she snapped before turning to other passengers, seeking allies. "You all saw how he was looming over me, right?" No one supported her version of events. Instead, several people nodded in agreement with Brian's assessment. As Heather returned with club soda and additional napkins, attempting to help Jasper salvage his suit, the situation had reached a critical juncture. Jasper Washington, CEO of a billion-dollar company, stood in the first-class cabin of a commercial airplane, publicly humiliated, his clothing soaked, while a woman who had caused the entire situation played the victim card. How he responded in the next few moments would reveal everything about his character, and change the course of an entire industry. The cabin hummed with tension as all eyes fixed on Jasper Washington. Red wine dripped from his ruined suit jacket onto the premium cabin carpet as Heather frantically dabbed at the spreading stain with increasingly soggy napkins. In this moment of public humiliation, Jasper had choices to make, choices that would define not just the next few minutes but potentially the rest of his career. Would you have lost your temper if you were in Jasper's position? Comment number 1 if you think he should demand Kimberly be removed from the flight immediately. Comment number 2 if you believe staying calm is the better strategy. And don't forget to hit that like button if you've ever witnessed someone maintaining incredible composure in an infuriating situation. As the whispers and phone cameras surrounded him, Jasper took a deep breath, channeling his grandfather's wisdom about dignity under fire. His face betrayed no anger, no humiliation, only thoughtful calculation. "Thank you, Heather," he said quietly to the flight attendant, gently declining the napkins. "I appreciate your help, but I think we're past the point of salvaging this suit." He turned to Kimberly, who still clutched her phone while maintaining her performance of fear and victimhood. "Ma'am, I harbor no ill will toward you. We all have difficult days." The gracious response clearly wasn't what Kimberly expected. Her expression faltered momentarily before she doubled down. "I've already called security," she stated, though her phone screen clearly showed no call in progress. "And I've texted my brother-in-law Robert about how I've been treated." Flight Captain Gordon Miller emerged from the cockpit, alerted by Heather to the disturbance. A tall man with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone with thousands of flight hours under his belt, he surveyed the scene with practiced neutrality. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, looking between Jasper and Kimberly. Before Jasper could respond, Kimberly launched into her narrative, complete with theatrical sniffles and trembling voice. "This man was incredibly aggressive toward me. When I explained I needed extra space because of my anxiety condition, he became threatening. I accidentally spilled my drink because he startled me. I don't feel safe flying with him." Captain Miller turned to Jasper. "Sir, your response." The entire cabin waited. Would he match her dramatics with righteous anger? Would he demand justice? Would he pull the CEO card? Instead, Jasper nodded respectfully to the captain. "The situation is straightforward. I approached my assigned seat and found this passenger occupying it. When your flight attendant confirmed my assignment, the passenger became upset and spilled her drink on me. Whether accidentally or deliberately isn't for me to judge." Several passengers murmured in approval at his measured response. "I have an important business meeting in Chicago," Jasper continued, "but I value the safety and comfort of all passengers above my own convenience. If my presence makes anyone uncomfortable, I'm happy to take another flight." The selflessness of this offer, from a man who had done nothing wrong and had a crucial meeting awaiting him, shifted the energy in the cabin completely. Even Captain Miller seemed impressed. Brian Carson spoke up again from across the aisle. "Captain, my wife and I witnessed everything. This gentleman has been nothing but professional while this woman has been problematic since boarding. We'd be happy to provide statements." Stephanie Carson, Brian's wife, nodded in agreement. She pushed past an elderly couple during boarding too. "We saw it all." Captain Miller turned back to Kimberly, whose victimhood performance was crumbling under scrutiny. "Ma'am, we take passenger safety very seriously. If you genuinely feel threatened, we can make arrangements for you to take another flight." "What? No." Kimberly protested, realizing her tactics had backfired. "I have important plans in Chicago. I can't miss this flight." "Just as Mr. Washington has an important meeting," the captain noted pointedly. At this moment, Jasper's phone rang. He checked the caller ID and excused himself to take the call a few steps away. "Thomas, good morning," he said quietly into the phone. The other passengers couldn't hear the conversation, but they noticed the captain's eyes widen as he overheard Jasper mention significant shareholder and systemic issue that needs addressing. After finishing the call, Jasper approached Captain Miller. "Captain, I've just spoken with Thomas Blackwell, your airline CEO. We were roommates at Howard University." He handed the captain his business card. "Jasper Washington, CEO of Washington Enterprises. My company holds a 17% stake in your airline's parent corporation." The revelation sent a ripple through the cabin. Kimberly's face drained of color. "Mr. Blackwell and I agree this situation represents a larger problem that needs addressing. He's asked that I work directly with your team to implement some immediate changes." Jasper's tone remained collegial, not threatening. "Would you be willing to make an announcement to the passengers? There's going to be a slight delay." Captain Miller, now understanding exactly who he was dealing with, nodded respectfully. "Of course, Mr. Washington." As the captain returned to the cockpit, Heather approached Kimberly. "Ma'am, we've checked our records and noticed this is your 7th complaint about seating arrangements in the past year. All previous incidents involved passengers of color." Kimberly sputtered indignantly, That's completely irrelevant." The cabin intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller speaking. I regret to inform you that due to an operational review, all flights from our airline have been temporarily grounded. We anticipate a delay of approximately 2 hours while new customer service protocols are implemented effective immediately. We apologize for any inconvenience." Throughout the cabin and presumably across airports nationwide, passengers heard the same announcement. An entire airline had just been ground to a halt because one woman couldn't bear the thought of sitting next to a black man in first class, even when that man happened to be one of the airline's largest investors. What would happen next? Would Kimberly face consequences for her actions? And how would the airline respond to this watershed moment? Subscribe to find out in the next part of this incredible true story of justice served at 30,000 feet. In a glass-walled conference room at National Airlines headquarters in Atlanta, emergency lights flashed on digital displays as executives rushed in, some still adjusting ties or smoothing blazers. CEO Thomas Blackwell, a tall man with a runner's build and prematurely gray hair, paced at the head of the table, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, Jasper, I understand completely," he said, making eye contact with his chief operating officer as she hurried through the door. "We're implementing immediate action. The board is being notified." He paused, listening. "You have my word, this will be addressed systemically, not as an isolated incident." As he ended the call, the tension in the room was palpable. 12 executives sat around the polished table, each face reflecting various degrees of concern, confusion, or outright panic. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thomas began, his voice grave, "we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Jasper Washington of Washington Enterprises was just subjected to discriminatory treatment on Flight 1382 from Memphis to Chicago. For those who don't know, Mr. Washington is not only the CEO of a Fortune 500 company but also represents investment funds that hold a 17% stake in our company. Murmurs spread around the table until Thomas raised his hand for silence. More importantly, he's my friend, and what happened to him today has happened to countless passengers who don't have his resources or connections. The difference is, today it happened to someone with the power to demand accountability. Monica Williams, the airline's recently hired Chief Diversity Officer, leaned forward. What exactly occurred, Thomas? As Thomas recounted the details, Digital Marketing Director Kevin Phillips was already monitoring social media on his tablet. It's starting to blow up online, he interrupted, turning the screen to show a Twitter feed. Passengers are posting videos. The hashtags #JusticeForJasper and #KarenOnAplane are gaining traction. Do we know who the female passenger is? Asked Diane Harris from Legal Affairs. Thomas nodded grimly. Kimberly Porter. And yes, she's related to Robert Porter on our board. She's his wife's sister. This revelation sent another wave of murmurs around the table. We've checked her customer history, added Customer Relations VP Julian Alvarez, reviewing data on his laptop. She has filed complaints after 7 previous flights, all involving seating disputes, all involving crew members or passengers of color. The pattern is undeniable. Monica Williams shook her head in disgust. And we've never flagged this pattern before today. Our systems weren't designed to track demographic factors in customer complaints, Julian admitted. A serious oversight we need to correct immediately. What exactly did Jasper request? Asked CFO Martin Howard, concern etched on his face. Are we looking at a lawsuit? A public statement? What's the damage control strategy? Thomas's response surprised everyone. He hasn't asked for anything for himself. No compensation, no special treatment. He wants systemic change. Immediate anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, revised protocols for handling seating disputes, and transparent consequences for discriminatory behavior from both staff and passengers. The room fell silent as the executives processed this information. The silence was broken by Monica. He's right. This isn't about one incident or one passenger. This is about a culture that's allowed these behaviors to continue unchecked. Thomas nodded. That's why I've temporarily grounded all flights. It's drastic, yes, and it will cost us millions, but it sends a clear message both internally and externally. This stops today. As if on cue, Thomas's assistant rushed in. Sir, Robert Porter is on line 1, and he sounds furious. Also, the Bailey family's office is calling about Mr. Washington missing their meeting. And we have press inquiries coming in from major networks. Before Thomas could respond, Monica spoke up. I'll handle Robert Porter. As Chief Diversity Officer, this conversation falls squarely within my purview. Thomas nodded gratefully. Marketing needs to draft a public statement immediately. Legal, I want a revised passenger code of conduct ready by end of day. Operations, prepare for implementing emergency anti-bias briefings for all flight crews before we resume service. As the room erupted into purposeful activity, Thomas stepped aside to take the call from the Bailey family, knowing that Jasper's missed meeting represented yet another cost of the discrimination he'd faced. Meanwhile, on Flight 1382, still parked at the gate, Kimberly Porter had been quietly escorted off the plane by airline staff. As she was led through the terminal, her face flushed with indignation, passengers recognized her from the rapidly spreading social media videos and began recording her walk of shame. This is outrageous, she protested to the stone-faced airline representatives accompanying her. Do you know who I am? Who my family is? Yes, Ms. Porter, replied the senior staff member calmly. That's precisely why this situation is being handled with such seriousness. Your relationship to our board member makes your behavior even more concerning from a corporate governance perspective. Back in the first-class cabin, Jasper had been provided with a fresh shirt and jacket from his carry-on bag. As he changed in the small lavatory, he reflected on his grandfather's words, "Sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect is calm dignity followed by meaningful action." Heather knocked gently on the lavatory door. "Mr. Washington?" "I have Mr. Blackwell on the line again. He says it's important." Jasper emerged, adjusting his replacement tie. "Thank you, Heather." Taking the phone, he listened intently before a small smile formed on his lips. "That's excellent news, Thomas." "Yes, I think that's exactly the right approach." As he returned the phone to Heather, Captain Miller approached. "Mr. Washington, we've received clearance to proceed to Chicago once the new protocols have been communicated to our crew. We should be airborne within 30 minutes. "Thank you, Captain," Jasper replied. "And please, call me Jasper." As he settled back into his now vacant seat 2A, several passengers nodded respectfully in his direction. Brian Carson leaned across the aisle. "That was impressive, sir. The restraint you showed, I'm not sure I could have done the same." Jasper smiled thoughtfully. "My grandfather used to say that dignity isn't just about how you carry yourself in difficult moments. It's about ensuring those moments become less common for those who come after you." What neither Jasper nor the airline executives yet realized was that this incident would catalyze changes far beyond one airline or one flight, changes that would reverberate throughout the entire industry and corporate America at large. By the time Flight 1382 finally reached cruising altitude en route to Chicago, the videos had already gone viral. Across all major social media platforms, the hashtags #JusticeForJasper and #KarenOnAplane were trending nationwide, with #DignityInTheSkies quickly joining them. In the economy section of the same flight, college student Zoe Mitchell was updating her TikTok followers. "You guys, I'm literally on the flight right now," she whispered into her phone camera. The man was so calm while she was throwing a complete tantrum. Then he made one phone call and grounded the entire airline. Icon behavior. Her video garnered 100,000 views before the plane even landed. At O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, news vans from local affiliates had already gathered, tipped off by social media about the incoming flight carrying Jasper Washington. Meanwhile, at Memphis International, reporters intercepted passengers from other national airlines' flights that had been delayed by the company-wide grounding. "It was inconvenient, sure," said one delayed passenger to a Memphis news crew, "but when we heard why it happened, most of us agreed it was necessary. Some things are more important than schedules." CNN ran a breaking news segment featuring an interview with Brian Carson via phone while he was still in the air. "What impressed me most was his composure," Brian told the anchor. This man had just had wine deliberately spilled on his expensive suit, was being falsely accused of aggression, and yet he remained completely dignified. Then we find out he's actually a major shareholder in the airline. It was like watching a masterclass in grace under pressure. On Twitter, celebrity reactions poured in, "Been flying national for years. Might be time to reconsider if this is how they treat their passengers." #JusticeForJasper. Basketball star Anthony Matthews, as a frequent flyer who's experienced similar treatment, I stand with Jasper Washington. This isn't just one incident, it's a pattern across the industry that needs addressing. #DignityInTheSkies. Academy Award-winning actress Tanya Rivera, watching that video reminded me of every time I've been made to feel unwelcome in spaces I've earned the right to occupy. Thank you Jasper Washington for showing us all how to respond with power and dignity. #JusticeForJasper. Grammy-winning musician Jordan Ellis' corporate response teams at competitor airlines scrambled to position themselves favorably as the story gained momentum. Delta's CEO issued a statement reaffirming their commitment to inclusive travel experiences, while United announced an accelerated timeline for their previously planned diversity training initiatives. On Wall Street, National Airline stock began to slide as investors worried about both the immediate costs of the grounded flights and the potential long-term reputational damage. By midday, shares were down nearly 7%, representing hundreds of millions in lost market capitalization. At Washington Enterprises headquarters in Memphis, Derek Monroe fielded a barrage of media inquiries. "Mr. Washington is currently unavailable for comment," he repeated patiently to each caller. "However, he has authorized me to share that he views today's incident as an opportunity for meaningful industry change rather than personal grievance." Meanwhile, internet sleuths had already identified Kimberly Porter, uncovering her history of problematic behavior. Someone found a video from 2 years earlier showing her berating a black hotel clerk over room accommodations. Another discovered complaints against her filed by former household staff, predominantly people of color, alleging verbal abuse and unfair treatment. The story took on additional dimensions as people began sharing their own experiences of discrimination while traveling. Black passengers posted about being questioned about their first-class tickets, Middle Eastern travelers recounted random, additional security screenings, and flight attendants of color described passenger interactions similar to what Heather had faced with Kimberly. One particular tweet from a former National Airlines flight attendant gained significant traction. "During training, we were tacitly encouraged to appease high-value customers, code for wealthy white passengers, at others' expense. Today's incident is the natural result of those unofficial policies." #Time for change. As the story evolved from isolated incident to cultural touchpoint, Jasper's phone buzzed with a text from Derek, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and every major network requesting interviews. Also, Hannah Bailey called directly. "Says to tell you, missed meeting or not, this is someone I want to work with." Jasper smiled slightly at this development as the plane began its descent into Chicago. The merger meeting may have been delayed, but perhaps something even more valuable had emerged from today's ordeal. His company's slogan, "Innovation through Inclusion," had always been more than a catchphrase to him. Now, he might have the platform to make those values resonate throughout an entire industry. As Flight 1382 touched down in Chicago, Jasper looked out the window to see the gathering media crews on the tarmac. The incident that began with one woman's entitlement and prejudice had mushroomed into a national conversation about dignity, respect, and corporate responsibility. For Jasper Washington, the CEO who grounded an airline with one phone call, the real work was just beginning. When Jasper Washington's phone rang in the private airport lounge where he'd been escorted to avoid the media frenzy, he was surprised to see Hannah Bailey's name on the caller ID. The merger meeting with Bailey Aerospace had been his top priority before the incident, and he'd assumed it would need to be rescheduled. "Hannah," he answered, "I was just about to call you. I apologize for missing our meeting." Hannah Bailey's voice came through clear and direct. "Jasper, under the circumstances, I think we can forgive the scheduling issue. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he assured her. "Just navigating an unexpected situation." "Unexpected is putting it mildly," Hannah replied. "I've just watched the videos that are circulating. The composure you maintained was remarkable." Jasper smiled slightly. "My grandfather would say it was simply survival instinct refined over generations." "Well, your grandfather sounds like a wise man." There was a pause before Hannah continued. "Jasper, I'm calling for 2 reasons. First, to reschedule our meeting, but not in some sterile conference room. I'd like to send my private jet to bring you to our Lake Michigan compound where we can talk without interruptions or prying cameras." "That's very generous," Jasper began, but Hannah wasn't finished. "Second, and more importantly, I think what happened today presents an opportunity that extends beyond our original merger discussions." This caught Jasper's attention. "I'm listening." Bailey Aerospace has been developing next-generation aircraft with a focus on efficiency and environmental impact, which aligns perfectly with your navigation systems. But we've been missing something crucial: the human element of air travel. Hannah's voice grew more animated. "Watching how that situation was handled, both the failure on National Airlines' part and your response to it, crystallized something I've been thinking about for years. Which is? Jasper prompted. The aviation industry has a systemic problem with inclusivity, from who designs the planes to who flies them to how passengers are treated. As a woman who inherited an aerospace company, I've experienced my own version of what you went through today. Not as severe, certainly not as public, but the same fundamental issue, people questioning whether you belong in the space you've earned. Jasper nodded, though she couldn't see him. I'm familiar with the feeling. I bet you are, Hannah agreed. Here's my proposal, beyond our original merger plans, let's create something new, an airline built from the ground up with dignity and inclusivity as core principles, not afterthoughts or marketing slogans. The boldness of the idea momentarily left Jasper speechless. Hannah Bailey wasn't just talking about a partnership, she was proposing they revolutionize an entire industry. Hannah, that's ambitious, he finally said. So was developing navigation systems that reduce fuel consumption by 30%, she countered. So was building an aerospace company that's still family-owned after 70 years. We do ambitious well, Jasper. Before he could respond, there was a knock at the lounge door. A National Airlines representative entered, looking nervous. Mr. Washington. There's a call for you from Thomas Blackwell. He says it's urgent. Tell him I'll call him back, Jasper decided. Hannah, your idea intrigues me. When can we meet? My jet will be ready whenever you are. Just say the word. 3 hours later, Jasper Washington was being welcomed onto the Bailey family compound, a stunning lakeside property north of Chicago where 3 generations of aerospace innovators had developed some of the industry's most revolutionary designs. Hannah Bailey greeted him personally. A tall woman in her early 40s with auburn hair and the confident handshake of someone raised to believe her ideas mattered. Welcome to Bailey Point, she said, leading him toward a converted boathouse that now served as a state-of-the-art meeting space. I thought we'd be more comfortable here than at headquarters. Inside, instead of the formal boardroom setup Jasper had expected, he found a casual arrangement of comfortable seating around a central table laden with refreshments. Also present were 2 Bailey aerospace engineers and Hannah's father, Howard Bailey, the company's chairman emeritus. Mr. Washington, Howard said, rising to shake Jasper's hand. Your reputation precedes you, but after today, I'd say even that reputation undersells your character. Thank you, sir. And please, call me Jasper. As they settled in, Hannah got straight to business. I've asked our team to bring concept designs for what we're now calling the Dignity Initiative. Father, would you like to explain? Howard nodded, his eyes bright with the enthusiasm of an engineer presented with a worthy problem. What happened to you today, Jasper, was inexcusable. But it highlighted something we've been discussing internally for years, how the physical design of aircraft either enhances or diminishes human dignity. One of the engineers, Dr. Sofia Rodriguez, pulled up digital renderings on the room's main display. We've been developing cabin designs that fundamentally rethink the passenger experience, she explained. Instead of treating economy passengers as cargo to be efficiently packed, what if we prioritized their dignity while maintaining profitability? The renderings showed innovative seating arrangements, privacy features, and accessibility considerations that Jasper had never seen in commercial aviation. This is remarkable, he admitted, studying the designs. But how does it become economically viable? Hannah smiled. That's where your navigation systems come in. The fuel efficiency gains from your technology offset the slight reduction in passenger density. We've run the numbers, it works. For the next 2 hours, they discussed their vision, an airline that would set new standards not just for passenger experience but for how staff were treated, how hiring was conducted, and how the entire culture of air travel could be transformed. Meanwhile, back at her suburban Chicago home, Kimberly Porter was experiencing a very different kind of transformation. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since she'd been escorted off the plane. Her social media accounts were flooded with messages, none of them supportive. Worst of all, her brother-in-law Robert had called to inform her that he was being forced to resign from National Airlines board over his attempts to intervene on her behalf. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he had shouted before hanging up. As the evening news played footage of her outburst on a loop, Kimberly began to realize that her actions might have consequences beyond anything she'd experienced before. The immunity she'd always enjoyed through family connections and social status had suddenly evaporated in the face of irrefutable video evidence and a cultural moment she hadn't seen coming. Back at Bailey Point, as dinner was served on the lakeside terrace, Jasper received a call from Thomas Blackwell. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Thomas began, sounding exhausted. "Not at all," Jasper assured him. "How are things proceeding?" "We've implemented the emergency training protocols for all flight crews. The board has unanimously approved the new passenger code of conduct, with Robert Porter's resignation noted. And we've reached out to every passenger inconvenienced by today's grounding with significant compensation vouchers." "That's good to hear," Jasper said sincerely. "There's something else," Thomas added. "The young pilot you met, Darnell Reynolds. I'd like to promote him to lead our new pilot training initiative focused on inclusive customer service. And the flight attendant, Heather Thompson, we're considering her for a senior role in our customer experience department. Would you support those moves?" Jasper smiled. "Wholeheartedly." They both showed exceptional professionalism today. As he ended the call, Jasper found Hannah watching him with interest. "Making positive changes at National?" she asked. "Trying to," he acknowledged. "Though I have to admit, your vision for something built from the ground up is more compelling than trying to retrofit an existing corporate culture." Hannah raised her glass. "Then here's to building something new. To dignity in the skies and beyond." As they clinked glasses, neither fully grasped how far-reaching their new partnership would become, or how one incident of discrimination handled with dignity would ultimately transform not just their industries but corporate America's approach to inclusion itself. The grand ballroom of Chicago's Lakeside Hotel buzzed with anticipation as journalists from every major network and publication found their seats. At precisely 10:00 a.m., 2 weeks after the incident that had captivated the nation, Thomas Blackwell stepped up to the podium, flanked by Jasper Washington and the airline's executive team. "Good morning," Thomas began, his voice steady despite the pressure of the moment. 2 weeks ago, an incident occurred on one of our flights that revealed serious shortcomings in our company culture and customer service protocols. Today, we're here not just to address that specific incident but to announce fundamental changes to how National Airlines operates. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as Thomas continued. "First, I want to publicly apologize to Jasper Washington for the discriminatory treatment he experienced. Mr. Washington is not just a valued customer and significant shareholder, he is a human being who deserves dignity and respect, as does every person who boards our aircraft." Thomas turned to Jasper, who nodded in acknowledgement, his expression solemn. "Second, I want to apologize to all our passengers who were inconvenienced by our decision to temporarily ground all flights that day. While drastic, that action reflected how seriously we took this matter. It wasn't just about one passenger or one flight attendant, it was about recognizing a systemic issue that required immediate intervention." The room remained silent as journalists frantically took notes. "Today, we're announcing the implementation of our new Dignity Assurance program," Thomas continued, gesturing toward a digital presentation that appeared on the screens behind him. "This comprehensive initiative includes mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, revised seating protocols that remove subjective decision-making from conflict resolution, a transparent three-strike policy for passengers who engage in discriminatory behavior, and the creation of a passenger advocacy board with diverse representation to review and improve our policies continuously." As Thomas outlined the specifics of each component, the screens displayed the faces of the program's new leadership team. "We're proud to announce that First Officer Darnell Reynolds will be leading our pilot training division, focusing on creating an inclusive environment in the cockpit and beyond." The image shifted to show Heather Thompson's professional headshot. Additionally, Heather Thompson has been promoted to Director of Customer Experience, where she'll oversee the implementation of our new service standards." Thomas paused, taking a breath before continuing with the most controversial announcement. "We also want to address the other individual involved in this incident." After a thorough review of her customer history, which revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior, Kimberly Porter has been permanently banned from flying with National Airlines or any of our partner carriers. A murmur spread through the assembled press corps. Furthermore, board member Robert Porter has resigned his position after it was discovered he attempted to intervene inappropriately on Ms. Porter's behalf. Thomas's tone made it clear this wasn't a voluntary resignation. "At National Airlines, we are committed to ensuring that no one, regardless of their connections, is exempt from our standards of respectful conduct." Thomas then invited Jasper to the podium. The room fell silent again as Jasper adjusted the microphone. "Thank you, Thomas. 2 weeks ago, I experienced something that many people of color face regularly, though perhaps not as publicly." Jasper's calm voice commanded attention without needing to raise its volume. "What matters now is not what happened to me, but what happens next for everyone who travels or works in this industry." Jasper declined to dwell on the incident itself, instead focusing on the path forward. "When Thomas and I discussed appropriate responses to what occurred, I made it clear that I wasn't interested in financial compensation or special treatment. What I wanted, what I believe we all want, is systemic change that ensures dignity for everyone." He continued, "To that end, I'm announcing today the establishment of the Washington Foundation for Dignity in Service Industries, funded initially with $10 million of my personal funds. This foundation will provide scholarships for underrepresented individuals pursuing careers in aviation and hospitality, as well as grants for research into creating more inclusive service environments." The announcement drew appreciative applause from the assembled journalists. "I believe that transformative moments require more than just addressing what went wrong," Jasper concluded. "They require us to envision and build something better. I look forward to seeing National Airlines lead the way in that effort." As the formal press conference transitioned to a Q&A session, financial analysts noted that National Airlines stock had begun to recover from its initial drop, with market observers citing the company's decisive response as a potential model for corporate crisis management. Meanwhile, across town in a substantially less glamorous setting, Kimberly Porter sat in her attorney's office, reviewing the cease and desist letters that had arrived from National Airlines' legal team. The airline's investigation had uncovered 7 previous incidents where she had filed complaints against staff or passengers of color, often resulting in unwarranted compensatory vouchers or upgrades. "They can't just ban me for life," she insisted, her voice lacking the confidence it had carried on the plane. "I've been a loyal customer for years. My family has connections." Her attorney, Lawrence Finch, removed his glasses wearily. "Ms. Porter, I've reviewed the evidence they've compiled, including the videos that now have millions of views online. Frankly, they're being relatively restrained in their response. Many companies would be pursuing legal action against you for the reputational damage alone. This is outrageous." Kimberly protested. "It was one misunderstanding." 8 misunderstandings, according to their documentation, Lawrence corrected. "All following a similar pattern, all directed at people of color. The airline is within its rights to refuse service to anyone who violates their code of conduct, which you agreed to when purchasing your tickets." As the reality of her situation sank in, Kimberly's indignation began to give way to genuine concern. Beyond the airline ban, she was facing social ostracism, had received notification that her country club membership was under review, and her husband's business partners had begun distancing themselves from any association with the Porter name. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, Kimberly Porter was experiencing actual consequences for her actions, a novel and deeply uncomfortable sensation. Back at the press conference, a reporter from the Wall Street Journal directed a question to Jasper, "Mr. Washington, many in your position might have pursued legal action against both the airline and Ms. Porter. Why did you choose this collaborative approach instead?" Jasper considered the question thoughtfully before responding. My grandfather once told me that justice and vengeance are different paths leading to different destinations. Vengeance might have provided momentary satisfaction, but justice provides lasting change. I'm more interested in changing the landscape for those who will come after me than in punishing those who wronged me. As cameras captured his response, social media feeds exploded with praise for Jasper's measured wisdom. The hashtag #DignityNotVengeance began trending alongside the now established hashtag #JusticeForJasper. What none of the journalists knew, what wasn't yet public information, was that the changes announced today were just the beginning. The partnership forming between Washington Enterprises and Bailey Aerospace would soon introduce an entirely new model of air travel, one built from the ground up with dignity as its foundation rather than an afterthought. As the press conference concluded, Thomas shook Jasper's hand for the cameras, whispering, "Thank you for pushing us to be better." Jasper smiled. Sometimes it takes a shock to the system to catalyze real change. The two men walked off stage together, their unexpected alliance a powerful symbol of what could be accomplished when accountability was embraced rather than avoided. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, a gleaming white aircraft with subtle blue and gold accents taxied toward the ceremonial water cannon salute at O'Hare International Airport. The words, "Dignity Air," emblazoned on its fuselage caught the sunlight as aviation enthusiasts and media representatives watched from the observation area. On the tarmac, a temporary stage had been erected for what industry insiders were calling the most significant aviation launch in decades. Jasper Washington stood at the podium, Hannah Bailey at his side, both beaming with well-earned pride. Today marks not just the inaugural flight of a new airline, Jasper announced to the assembled crowd, but the beginning of a new chapter in commercial aviation, one where dignity isn't a luxury upgrade but the foundation of every interaction, every policy, and every decision. The journey to this moment had been intense. In the months following the infamous blanket incident, Jasper and Hannah had accelerated their partnership, combining Washington Enterprises' revolutionary navigation systems with Bailey Aerospace's human-centered design philosophy. Their shared vision had attracted top talent from across the industry, substantial investor interest, and unprecedented public goodwill. Dignity Air represents our commitment to 3 core principles, Hannah explained as she took her turn at the microphone. Environmental responsibility, equitable treatment, and economic sustainability. We believe passengers shouldn't have to choose between being treated with respect and affordable travel. We believe staff shouldn't have to choose between enforcing company policy and protecting their own dignity. And we believe our planet shouldn't bear the cost of our desire to connect with one another. The first Dignity Air aircraft, christened Resilience, featured cutting-edge technology that reduced carbon emissions by 40% compared to industry standards. Its interior had been designed with input from disability advocates, plus-sized passengers, parents of young children, and other groups often marginalized in traditional cabin layouts. More revolutionary than the physical aircraft, however, was the company's operational philosophy. Dignity Air had implemented transparent pricing with no hidden fees, living wages for all staff including previously contracted positions like baggage handlers, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior from either passengers or employees, regardless of status or connections. None of this would have been possible, Jasper acknowledged, without the painful moment that brought us here. Sometimes transformation requires disruption. As if on cue, a familiar figure approached the stage from the VIP seating area. Kimberly Porter, dressed conservatively and without the designer accessories that had once seemed part of her identity, stepped up to the microphone at Jasper's gesture of welcome. The crowd murmured in surprise. The woman whose entitlement had launched 1,000 headlines was now standing alongside the man she had humiliated. "Thank you, Mr. Washington, for allowing me to be part of today's event," Kimberly began, her voice lacking its former haughtiness. "6 months ago, I became infamous for behavior I'm deeply ashamed of now. My actions that day weren't isolated incidents but part of a lifetime of unexamined privilege and bias." She paused, visibly emotional. The consequences were severe, as they should have been. But the most painful consequence was finally seeing myself as others saw me. Kimberly explained how her community service sentence, ordered by a judge after related charges of assault for the wine spilling incident, had led her to work with the Racial Equity Alliance, an organization that helped people confront and overcome their biases. Through this work, she had begun the difficult process of genuine change. "I won't pretend that 6 months of self-reflection erases a lifetime of harmful behavior," she acknowledged. "But I'm committed to the ongoing work of becoming a better person and helping others do the same. That's why I'm honored that Dignity Air has allowed me to assist with developing their customer sensitivity training program, sharing my experience as a cautionary example." As Kimberly returned to her seat, Jasper reclaimed the podium. Transformation isn't just about new aircraft or policies, it's about people. It's about creating spaces where everyone can learn, grow, and yes, sometimes even redeem themselves through genuine accountability. The inaugural flight would carry a symbolic passenger manifest. Jasper's mother, Dorothy Washington, who had raised him alone in South Memphis, Heather Thompson and Darnell Reynolds, now executives in the new venture, Brian and Stephanie Carson, whose witness testimony had helped establish the truth of the original incident. And several young scholarship recipients from the Washington Foundation, representing the next generation of aviation professionals. "6 months ago, I was denied a seat because of my race," Jasper said as he concluded his remarks. "Today, we're creating thousands of seats where no one will be denied their humanity." The applause was thunderous as Jasper and Hannah cut the ceremonial ribbon, officially launching Dignity Air. What few people knew was how deeply the blanket incident had transformed the entire industry in those 6 months. National Airlines, under Thomas Blackwell's leadership, had experienced a remarkable turnaround after implementing their Dignity Assurance program. Their stock had not only recovered but reached new highs as customers responded positively to the company's transparency and accountability. More significantly, other airlines had begun adopting similar measures, recognizing that treating passengers and staff with dignity wasn't just ethically sound but good business. The industry consortium had established the Dignity Standards, a set of best practices that most major carriers had now adopted. The impact extended beyond aviation. Hotels, restaurants, and retail chains had begun implementing their own versions of dignity-centered service, recognizing that the social media era had made accountability inevitable. Better to embrace it proactively than be forced into it by the next viral incident. As the first passengers began boarding Dignity Air's inaugural flight, Jasper took a moment to call his late grandfather's favorite scripture to mind. "But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." Dorothy Washington, elegant in a royal blue suit, approached her son and squeezed his hand. "Your grandfather would be so proud," she said softly. "Not just of what you built, but how you built it." Jasper nodded, watching as Heather Thompson, now Dignity Air's Director of Customer Experience, warmly welcomed passengers onto the flight. At the boarding gate stood Darnell Reynolds in his captain's uniform, ready to pilot the inaugural journey. And at the check-in counter, working as part of her ongoing training program, was Kimberly Porter, the woman whose blanket had once been a barrier, now learning to make space for others. The circle had closed. A moment of indignity had transformed into a movement for dignity that was changing an industry, changing lives, and perhaps, in its own small way, changing America itself. This story teaches us that responding to discrimination with dignity can be more powerful than reacting with anger. Jasper Washington could have demanded Kimberly's removal or sued the airline, but instead chose to address the systemic issues. His composed response transformed a humiliating moment into industry-wide change. True power isn't about asserting dominance when wronged, it's about leveraging your influence to create lasting improvements for everyone. By focusing on dignity rather than vengeance, Jasper created meaningful change that benefited countless future travelers. The story also highlights how privilege often blinds people to their own biases. Kimberly's journey from entitled Karen to someone working toward redemption shows that accountability, while painful, can lead to genuine growth. Perhaps most importantly, we learn that discrimination isn't just about individual incidents but about systems that allow such behavior to continue unchecked. Real change requires examining and transforming those systems, not just punishing individual offenders. What do you think about Jasper's approach to handling discrimination? Would you have maintained such composure in his position? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you've experienced racism or witnessed someone handling it with dignity, tell us that story too. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in the power of composed responses to injustice, subscribe for more inspiring racism stories, and share with someone who needs this message today. Thank you for watching, and may you face life's challenges with the same dignity and wisdom Jasper demonstrated.